If any of you have seen the movie or read the book Aaron Brockovich, and how they poisoned Pacific Gas and Electric, poisoned the water down in California, this is the guy that went after him and got the residents of the town $333 million for poisoning their water and causing cancer. The more I read about this guy, the scarier it got. This guy has won over 100 $1 million plus lawsuits, and he's done over 100 $1 million plus settlements. This guy's a good guy to have on your side. And, and Jason's firm, of course, has been, with a lot of the asbestos and mesothelioma lawsuits and so on. Their firm's been around for a long time, and they stand up for the consumer. Good guys. So with that, I'll let these guys start a discussion panel on what's been going on with concussions. Maybe I can pull this back a bit so that we can not have it so blocked.
Cool.
Yeah. You can sit if you want.
I'm good. Thank you very much. Nice to see you. Thanks for those kind words. I asked the chairman, why do you want me at this thing? He said, well, I'll tell you why, Tom, because you're a model lawyer. And I really felt good about that. Then I looked up model in the dictionary. It said a small replica of the real thing. I went back, I said, a small replica of the real thing. He says, no, Tom, we want you because you're a warm speaker. Looked up warm in the dictionary. It said, not so hot. So that's the reason I'm here. I think in life, you're not judged in life when you make a mistake. I think how you're really judged in life is after you make the mistake, what do you do about it? These owners are despicable, in my view. That's all there is to it. Here they had a problem. They knew it. I go way back in this stuff. I handled a Todd Hart case against Riddell a long time ago. And it was during that case, probably 15 years ago, that we got a bunch of Riddell information, and a bunch of the stuff was the NFL information, all of them talking about the issue of concussion, et cetera. And knowing all this, you would think they would have done something, maybe to try to prevent it, maybe to do something to the people that got hurt. Wouldn't you think you'd do that if it was your company, huh? If you ran a company and all of a sudden a bunch of people got poisoned or something like that, you say, my God, how can I help these guys? But I guarantee you that's not their attitude. I'm lead counsel in this litigation. I think we represent more players than anybody, but then we're all under one roof. These cases are now transferred to Philadelphia because in federal court, if there are cases scattered all over, then they're gathered up together. And so, in essence, all the players are in one group with respect to the things you have in common, the motions, et cetera, although they're all individual cases. So one person at the end of the day, if we're successful in this, would be able to receive $100, and one person may receive $10 or whatever, depending upon the real injuries that person had. So here's the status of things. The cases are filed. I initially wanted those cases in Los Angeles, but we got assigned to a very bizarre judge, and I thought, this guy isn't the ticket. So I then pushed to have the MDL to another jurisdiction, and so we ended up in Philadelphia. And all these cases are together with respect to the major issues that take place. And there's a very serious issue in these cases. The serious issue right now, there's a motion to dismiss them, that you cannot go forward in these cases. We argued it a couple weeks ago. Massive briefing and everything on both sides. And I think the NFL's position with respect to trying to resolve things or do the right thing more or less is dependent upon this. Here's the legal issue. You're all subject to a contract of the players' union because that was the deal that you entered into. I know you didn't know that. Nobody does, but nonetheless, that's what's occurred. And then under that contract, you've agreed not to sue the NFL. So the NFL came in and said, hey, listen, these guys agreed not to sue the NFL, to hell with them. Get them out of here. And so that's their motion to dismiss. Now then, there are some loopholes in that, however. One loophole is that, indeed, those agreements not to sue does not cover anything that was concealed from the players, okay? I think that if you were complaining about a knee got hurt during your playing days and so forth, I think that contract would probably force you to go to arbitration or something like that. Here, however, there was massive, absolute, positive, without a doubt, concealment of a real serious problem. You see, it's one thing, gee, I got a concussion. Boy, I got hit in my head and I could be out for a few days. Nobody ever said, hey, pal, let me tell you something. The effect of this thing is not a few days. The effect of this thing is the rest of your life. That's just a little tiny secret that somehow they didn't, intend to disclose. And then as the game changed, where everybody weighs, 360 pounds and everyone runs the 40 and 4.6, you have these massive forces that take place. And in fact, the head-to-head stuff is the stuff that is the biggest problem. In doing a survey of we looked at some brain scans of 110 players. The most severely hurt were the offensive linemen. Second most were the defensive linemen, then the defensive linebackers. Matter of fact, the position that seemed to be the most serious was the right offensive tackle, because characteristically the best defensive guy is on that side because quarterbacks roll more to the right and so forth. So, but we can now categorize these things almost by players. The safeties and with some exceptions, the quarterbacks and so forth did not seem to have quite the same degree of injury as some of the other players. Then the other lousy part of things is that if you get a concussion, the last thing that you should do is go get your head hit again for a period of 10 days to 2 weeks. A second hit on the head is 100 times more of a problem than the first hit. And we all know, I mean, just as a layperson, you guys lived it, but as a layperson, everybody get practically knocked out, and they sit out 2 plays and they're in on 3rd down. And there was a hell of a lot of information knowing that that's the wrong thing to do. The doctors involved in the case weren't exactly people in your corner. Okay, how many fingers do I have? Okay, that's close enough. I have 3, you indicated 2, that's pretty close, get back in. So then what happens is this. What happens is the long effect of these injuries on people. You see, it would be just fine if you hurt your knee and went through a bunch of pain and they had to fix it and now everything is fine. That would be okay. But these particular injuries are such, and I'm not going to invade the doctor's territory here because they've lined up some good people to explain this, and so I don't want to even, venture into that. But the fact of the matter is that these things, first of all, they're not apparent initially. Sometimes it kicks in over a period of time. And in looking at all the stats, it's a very serious problem, And here people have lives to lead. They're in their 40s, they're in their 50s, they need a job, they have to, and indeed a lot of the players having a very difficult time with that. So I'm amazed at the attitude of the owners in this situation. There were so many ways in which the matter could be resolved. In other words, I suggested, let's see, first of all, I said, I don't think it's possible for the NFL to pay everybody $10 million. But let's get a way that we can analyze the degree of injury. And then maybe what we could do, we could elongate pension. We could change pension. So instead of $2,000 a month, maybe it's $10,000 a month. Instead of 5 years, maybe it's 15 years or 20 years, depending on the degree of injury. We can do something like that. I think the NFL would get a great deal of good support out of that. The players then would be taken care of, and that's sort of an analysis. And they said, absolutely not. You know, there's a players' agreement here. They can't even sue us, et cetera. So we argued that case, as I said, about 2 weeks ago, and we're in front of a pretty nice judge. She's somewhat older. She was appointed to the federal bench by Bush, the first Bush, not the second Bush, and the other dealings that our firm has had with her has been very positive in terms of being fair, et cetera. And I think the large amount of publicity given to this case, I mean, it's all one way. It's all the players are victims. It's not, no, gee, the poor NFL. And there's been a lot of publicity in Philadelphia on the point and everything else. So I think she's sensitive to the way in which people view this. As a matter of fact, she brought me into chambers along with the NFL person for the NFL. And she said, Mr. Girardi, you know, you have an issue here with respect to the player's contract. I said, Your Honor, I do. But I said, Your Honor, those 3 cases right in this district say if there's concealment. And so she says, oh, no, I know those cases. I'm just saying that's an issue. I said, yes, Your Honor, it is. Then she turns to the NFL guy and she says, do you realize what the public thinks of you, the way you treat players? You better do something about this. So that was about 2 months ago, and there were just 2 of us and the judge, so it was an off-the-record conversation. It wasn't private, so the fact I said this, I'm not violating a confidence. But it was, I think, something that indicated her attitude. Another legal issue they have, the idea being, okay, you have to go to arbitration. Well, the fact of the matter is you can't go to arbitration against somebody unless you have an arbitration agreement with them. You don't have arbitration agreements with the NFL. There's no such thing. So in other words, if you and I are going to go enter into a deal, a business deal, and we say, listen, if we have a dispute, well, we'll arbitrate it. And then you sign it and I sign it. Well, then the 2 of us are bound by that. On the other hand, if we're in a construction deal and we have this arbitration agreement, we hire you, you're the roofer, you don't have an arbitration agreement. You can come and sue our buns if we've screwed you around, et cetera. So here the whole idea is, well, arbitration is not viable because there's no arbitration agreement with the NFL. So this talk would make more sense, I think, in 2 or 3 weeks, because then I think we'd have a much better handle on exactly what's going on. The briefing has been massive. On the other hand, it's pretty simple. Hey, there was concealment. You cannot waive concealment. That's all there is to it. If I say to you, I want you to work in my backyard, but I know full well it's loaded with chromium, you're going to get lung cancer, et cetera, then, and even though we have a arbitration agreement, or we have a you're not going to sue me agreement, it doesn't cover that. It may cover the fact you slipped on the grass, it may cover things that you would expect to be part of the job, but it would not cover things that I know and you're just going to be the victim of, and now you suffer this massive hit, and then I say, okay, you can't sue because, you know, we have this deal. I don't think this judge is going to go for it. It's probably round 1 because if, just depending upon what she does, if she rules in our favor, I think there's a good chance that they take an appeal of that, you know. So I don't look, maybe though that would change their attitude in terms of trying to think of a solution to help the players, especially help those players who've been massively hurt, help those players potentially hurt. See, one of the problems, as I see it, that we have to get some protection of the players downstream, because a lot of times, and I don't mean to scare anybody here, but a lot of times these symptoms, it's something like getting Alzheimer's. in essence. I mean, the same symptomatology as getting Alzheimer's, but it doesn't happen the day after the concussion or the month after the concussion. The onset is sometimes a couple years, several years, a decade down the road, but all of a sudden you see this same pattern emerging. And I'll let the doctors talk about that. So it seems to me one of the goals of this case, as far as I'm concerned, is to get compensation for the players, get compensation for them based upon their injuries, and to get provide medical attention for these players, so that they, going forward, especially if they're not employed, that have medical insurance with somebody else or things like that, they'll be protected. So this is, this little project has taken up a good portion of our law firm's lives. I really believe in it. I mean, it's really disgusting. He mentioned PG&E. They were just, I'm amazed as a lawyer what companies do. I'm amazed as a lawyer what these NFL owners do. In Aaron Brockovich, since he mentioned it, I got a lot of credit for this huge win, but the real win was somebody who sent me 2 letters in the mail, Tom Girardi printed, no return address. We open it up, and it's a letter from the guy at Hinckley, and that's where the thing occurred, Hinckley, California, to the executive vice president in San Francisco. It says the chromium levels are now off the chart. Should we give the people bottled water? And he replies, the less said about this, the better. It could lead to problems for the company. Now then, can you imagine? See, it's one thing, I'll go rob a liquor store. Can you imagine subjecting people to cancer and so forth knowingly? I was the lead counsel in the Vioxx litigation. And that case eventually settled for a lot of money for folks around the country, $4.8 billion actually. And there were lawyers all over the country who represented people. But I don't deserve any credit there either. That too was a letter sent to me, no return address. Open it up. We knew that Vioxx coagulated blood, and Vioxx was made for people of my vintage, the over 50 set, the same group of people that were overweight, they didn't work out, they had high cholesterol. And if you start coagulating blood in people of that vintage, you're going to get heart attacks. A 19-year, 18-year-old girl who can take all the Vioxx she wants is not going to get a heart attack. But you start getting the older group with those sorts of arteries that are already somewhat diminished, you're going to get heart attacks. But we couldn't prove that Merck knew that Vioxx coagulated blood until I get this envelope. We had asked for all these documents. Nobody produced it. We open it up, and it's a memo from the chief medical officer of Merck, February 10th, 2001, when they're taking Vioxx into clinical trials. And it says, are we going to give people aspirin with the Vioxx? If we don't, we'll have so many heart attacks it'll kill the drug. Can you imagine? And so these dirty, rotten bastards knew all this. We just settled a case last week with SmithKline, Avendia. Avendia is for diabetics. Avendia causes heart attack and stroke, totally concealed. And in the mail, no return address, open it up, and it's a memo from the first clinical trials of Avendia, and they got 2 heart attacks. The executive vice president writes in the margin, this will never see the light of day. So we requested them to give us a report of the first thing, and they sent it to us, but it didn't have the language on it. So I sent another request. I said, we would like the word day to appear in the left column. So then they knew we had it, and so then all of a sudden, Tom, can't we sit down and settle this? So, and the same thing here in the NFL, I mean, there was one case that truly the company wasn't at fault. There was a baby formula that didn't have vitamin K in it. Nobody knew that you even needed vitamin K for a baby's brain to properly mature, and they didn't intentionally leave it out. Nobody even thought you had to put it in. And lo and behold, a lot of these little babies were very badly harmed, and So we filed the suit. It's a defective product. But there, nobody knew. Now, the product is still defective. Under the law, they still have to pay. But it truly was not anything intentional. In all these other cases we have, from Accutane that totally wipes out teenagers' bowels for getting rid of a zit, they knew all this stuff. And as a lawyer, I say to myself, what's going on here? Why in the world would a company, why in the world would these owners not try and do the right thing? First of all, do the right thing to prevent it. And then failing that, at least, okay, what am I going to do now for these people that due to my conduct? See, they did fine. They went to the bank, the whole crowd of them. They did great. And now the players, especially, this is a 3-year ordeal, as you know. I mean, if the lifespan of an NFL player is between 3 and 4 years, I mean, I know some of you longer than that, but if you put everybody into the same pot, and then to subject yourself to such a serious medical problem in your line of work that's concealed from you and nobody does a damn thing about it, and not one word of apology. Now all the BS are coming out. Okay, we're going to kick off the ball, in the 20-yard line. Or guess what? You need some very serious things to take place. You got to get rid of head-to-head. That's for sure. And that shouldn't be a 15-yard penalty. That should be you're out of the game. In other words, you got to have really teeth in this to protect people. And, we got to protect the kids, too. We got to protect the high school kids playing this game. We got to protect the college kids playing this game. And we got to protect the pros playing this game. Because you didn't get paid for that. You got paid because you could run fast, you could catch the ball, you could throw the ball, you could tackle the guy. That's what you got paid for. You didn't get paid for living the rest of your damn life with some sort of a problem of not remembering things, etc. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. Obviously, you'll find out about this the day after I find out about it, when the ruling comes down from the judge. And I think, though, we have a pretty good opportunity that, in fact, we should win this motion. Once winning that motion, the next issue becomes, okay, what happens next? Knowing their proclivity for being dirty bastards, they'll undoubtedly try to appeal it and everything else to prolong things. But I feel fairly confident that we're going to be successful. I really do. Because it would be such an injustice. Every once in a while, as a lawyer, you got to say to yourself, gee, would it really be right to hurt all these guys and do nothing about it when these guys knew it? And I think at the end of the day, I think we're going to be successful on it. I certainly pray that we are. I certainly continue to invest all my waking minutes to make sure that it is successful. But that's more or less the status of things as we speak.
Did everybody hear the question about?
Okay, I'll repeat it here. What happens if they do appeal with respect to the timeline, and what is the effect of it? If they do appeal, we think that we could ask the court for an immediate ruling on the appeal. And immediate in the law is a little different than you think of immediate. Immediate in the law is probably maybe 6 months, maybe a year, which would advance the situation. And I think if we showed the massive injustices taking place and the massive need, to get this done, I think that's pretty good. And also, I think now that if they get a note from their mom here that the court has ruled against them, I think they almost have to change their attitude. You have several things that are happening that are not good for the NFL. You have attendance falling off. You have cases like this don't do it any good. You have, the president saying, I'm glad I didn't have a boy to play football, things like that. Well, that has an effect on a lot of people with respect to their, quote, love of the game. This is supposed to be the greatest game ever invented, and now all of a sudden they're not doing anything to try to help those people that truly got hurt. I'll close in this fashion. I love being a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer starting in the 6th grade. Perry Mason was on at 7 o'clock. And I indicated to these other lawyers in the International Academy with me about, God, you know, Perry Mason was just great. They said, Tom, Perry Mason was a lousy lawyer. I said, how about his won-loss record, pal? He said, no, he had a great win-loss, but he did no doodly squat about the case till about 7:20 when the investigator, Paul Drake, came in with a surprise witness. He said, otherwise he was just fumbling around with Della Street. So anyway, I said, baloney. So they went and they got 3 from Paramount. They got 3 of the clips, the film clips of Perry. They made me watch them, and Perry was a lousy lawyer, but he was my inspiration, certainly. And the trial practice of law, I mean, you shouldn't get paid for this. And now I want to get paid at the end of this case, but you shouldn't, because it's, I had a case in Texas with Scotty Baldwin, great Texas lawyer, and it was an oil rig fire, and the guy got killed in the fire, and so he represented the widow and 2 minor children. Our firm represented 2 adult children by a prior marriage. So the major case, obviously, would be the widow and the minor children. But these young adults, they also had a case. And I thought, God, this would be great. I can send one of my young lawyers down and try this case with this great Scotty Baldwin. He called, he said, baloney, Girardi, you get your buns down here. We're going to try this case together. So I sat there, and Scotty more or less tried the case, and he asked the jury for $7.5 million. The defense lawyer gets up, he says, this Girardi guy, this Baldwin guy, they come in here, they ask for $7.5 million. It reminds me when I was a little boy and went to the show. I asked my dad for $2 to the show, but the show only cost 50 cents. And that's what those 2 guys remind me of. Baldwin gets back, he says, you know, ladies and gentlemen, this whole case about credibility, Tom and I, we want you to believe us. This lawyer over here, he wants you to believe him, a man who admittedly lied to his own father. Finally, Racehorse Haynes is a big criminal defense lawyer. I've tried all these murder cases, once again in Texas, and there was a murder case. They never found the body. There was a lot of circumstantial evidence that the murder had taken place and so forth, but Racehorse is now, this is true, Racehorse is arguing the case that, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there was no murder. And as a matter of fact, in 45 seconds, through that door will walk the alleged murder victim. God, all the jurors are staring at it, and 45 seconds passes, nothing happens. Racehorse said, ladies and gentlemen, don't be mad at me. I had to demonstrate to you a very, very important legal principle, and that's beyond a reasonable doubt. And you all had a doubt, and that's why you were staring at that door. Jury goes out, jury comes back, guilty is charged. Racehorse goes and talks to the jurors afterwards. He says, you know, guilty is charged. All you guys were staring at that door. They said, yeah, but your client wasn't staring at the door. Hey, thank you very much.
If I could just say, if anybody has any questions, please ask them. But if you ask them loud or go to the microphone so we can all hear. Thank you.
Again, I'm Jason Luckasevic. I know I met a lot of you, and I'm not going to go into the story that I did last year, how this case got started. I just want to say, I am so glad that I brought along Tom, and we've been working on these cases for over 2 years. And Tom is by far, in my opinion, the best lawyer in this country, and we have him on our team. But even greater thing about Tom, besides his lawyering skills, and he hasn't mentioned this yet, is his wife is #1 on the Billboard charts.
That's right, yeah.
So it's a great team that we've had. I just had a few questions I wanted to ask all of you. Did anybody ever expect that when we started these cases with the first 75 players that would be up over 4,000 today? Anybody ever think that that would happen? It's pretty surprising, isn't it? You know, one of the other things that I always like doing and like asking, because I get to talk to you guys every day, and and not everybody gets to see these things, and there's a lot of people that aren't former players. One of the questions I like to ask guys the first time that I meet them is, how many of you in this room that were a former player were ever diagnosed with a concussion when you played? That's probably a lot less than half of you. How many of you that were diagnosed played that next game?
Sure.
That's everybody. Unbelievable. Same game.
Same next series.
Go ahead, Joe.
The question I have is, I played the wedge for 13 years. I know I have many concussions. Mike Webster died, doctor from North Carolina. I said, what is a concussion? I didn't know what a concussion was. I know it got knocked out maybe. He said, when you see stars. I go, damn. When I see stars, I saw it every day in practice. That's all. I'm not joking. I mean, every day, 13 years in a wedge. They banned the wedge, they banned the head slap, you got loss of hearing in your left ear from right-handed defensive lineman. Those are the things that if the judge hears that, they got to know you're not, this isn't a game, we're not teasing, this is serious matters. And it's sick that they don't take care of the guys who played like Ed 16 years. Who knows how many times he got hit, side hit from a lineman. I mean, it just goes on and on. But when these owners just deny that this happened, it's ridiculous. No more wedge, no more field turf, which also causes concussion, because when you hit the ground, boom, your head hits the concrete. No more red flags. It goes on and on. But I just hope you, I know you will, you're good lawyers, but I hope you really on that point to these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Joe, I can't thank you enough for people like you, being a Hall of Famer as you are, to speak up and be an advocate. I encourage that with all of you guys. One of the things that Tom really didn't get a chance to touch on, but this lawsuit is about you. It's not about us as lawyers. And the more that you guys are out there explaining what you go through and what you went through, it really is important for everybody to hear that and everybody to see that. Okay, I'm going to sit down. I really don't have much more to add. The only thing that I do want to do, and then you guys could all ask questions, and Tom and I will help you, but one of the things that I always do, and I still get calls every week, Tom as well, can I still join? Is it too late? It's never too late to join. The statute typically runs when you learn of something. When you learn you have a problem, typically the law says you have 2 years from when you learn of that. So if you haven't signed up, if you believe you have problems, if you've been diagnosed, or if there are buddies of yours out there that don't have that communication access, that you have to run over to their house and say, hey, look, I'm involved in this, maybe you should as well. I have some paperwork, we have our cards, we'll be happy to help them out, do whatever it is we need to do to walk them through the process, because it is important for them that they not miss out on it. I didn't hear the question.
What if your doctors are dead? Like 2 of my doctors.
Yeah, that isn't, there are medical records that are still there, and then obviously a new doctor would be able to look at the records and formulate his own opinions and so forth. So that would not be a problem. The only thing, Jace, I'm a little bit worried about is that there's been so much publicity given to this case that it could trigger knowledge even if you yourself aren't directly onto it. So once again, I don't know what's going to happen with this case, but it seems to me that either you or your friends and so forth, if you have a difficulty, you better get in it pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I would just say that we're going to have a question and answer, so ask all the questions you like, and say it loud enough so we can all hear it, or like George Visker, go to the microphone and ask it. But I would just like to commend Tom Girardi and Jason Luckasevic on the fact that they understand the nature of the game, and when they ask, who came back and played after a concussion, the players in here remember, that if you got a concussion, you came out, if you didn't go back the next play, you were treated less than a man. They'd hold up 3 fingers, and if you said, well, I got 2 or 4, they'd laugh and they'd say, good enough, go back in. They never took it serious. In fact, the word concussion in my era in the 70s was not even mentioned. You know, it was be a man, do it for the team. So when you say concealment, I personally appreciate that word because that's right next to fraud. And that's what I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I think it is. So anyway, ask all the questions you like, but just ask them loud, and these 2 gentlemen, I'm sure, will answer the question. So, George.
You know, I can probably...
And introduce yourself, too.
I'm George Visker. I played for the Niners back 80 and 81. I can touch on probably about everything we've spoken on today. Playing with a concussion during the 80 season, I suffered a major concussion against the Cowboys. First play I'm in, first quarter. Trainers and doctors laughingly told me later on in the week when my memory returned that I went through 20 to 25 smelling salts during the game, keep me on the field. Early in the 81 season, the Super Bowl season, I developed hydrocephalus, underwent emergency VP shunt brain surgery. They told me I could still play. While I'm in the hospital, 14 days in intensive care, they're calling me to tell me we're going to have a special made helmet to protect your shunt. Now I have a drain tube literally to this day that goes from my brain to a pressure valve in the back of my head. There's a tube goes down to my stomach right now. So as we all understand, I was all in. Hey, if the doctor says I'm good to go, I'm good to go. You know, 4 months after the Super Bowl, my shunt fails. I'm brought into the hospital in a coma. I have 2 more brain surgeries, 10 hours apart. I'm given last rites, and I'm also given the hospital bills. And I had a several-year battle just to get workers' comp. And they took me so far as to put me on stand at my workers' comp hearing, and their attorney brought out my last day's practice schedule and went over the whole day and asked me questions, grilled me on, 7 to 7:15 individual meetings, explained that. And I was livid that I even had to answer these questions. And luckily for me, I did win my case. And, a lot of you know my story, but I'll try to keep it brief. I used vocational review. I didn't take a penny from them. They offered me $35,000 to go away. And all I asked for, I said, I want what any injured employee has earned. I want my past medical paid for. I want my future left open. And I want to use vocational rehab because I can no longer do my job, which was a professional football player. And I used vocational rehab, and I went back to school to complete my biology degree. The first year back, in 10 months, I have 4 more brain surgeries, 3 grand mal seizures, while I'm trying to finish 4 semesters of chemistry, physics. Took me 5 more years. While I'm having the surgeries, I developed dyslexia, major short-term memory issues, and to this day, they have gotten progressively worse over the years. And I've had my own business for years, but I've fought through everything. And literally, I have 30 years of these things. My entire days have to be written down, hour to hour, and every couple nights I'll read back through the week or 2 prior just to try to remember what I did. But we need these stories to come out, guys, and we all know, we can all appreciate this. When you blow out, and they always give these little terms, you blow out a knee. It's not torn ligaments, it's you blew out a knee, got your bell rung. Hey, there's no bell ringing. When I was playing in 81, 80, if a boxer, and this is what I've spoken at Senate hearings now, guys, congressional hearings, people need to hear the story. But, a boxer, if I'd suffered a concussion like I did in 1980, a boxer wouldn't have boxed for 6 months. And they give you this, well, we didn't know about it, bull. This was no secret that having, being knocked unconscious is a serious brain injury. And now I have gotten to the point where I've fought and fought and fought to try to keep my life going. And I was forced to finally file for Social Security disability just a few months ago, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to support my family, which we've already lost the house. My family split up because where they're staying, there's no room for me there. I'm staying out of office for the last year, sleeping on the floor. I'm doing traumatic brain injury consulting because that's about the only thing that I really know that I don't have to put a lot of effort into to try to think about what I'm doing the next step. I can get up and talk about it. But this is a progressive disease like they talk, like he said. And just because you don't have symptoms right after you play, you know, those neurons get inflamed and they start dying off in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. 2.5 years ago at age 51, I was on 4 different dementia medicines at once and anti-seizure meds. I've had grand mal seizures for 32 years. So this stuff is serious, and it's a long, and what it does to the families, and it's not just us, what it does to the families, you know, it's not only criminal, it's sinful what they've done. They know what the hell they're doing, you know. This is no secret. You know, guys suffer major brain injuries and damage, and they blow us off. So we need more and more guys to step forward and tell these stories, because everywhere I go, I was speaking at California Senate probably 4 days ago, and I just got an email last night that the Senate hearing I spoke at a few weeks prior for the California Brain Injury Association, they were pushing to try to make treatment available for people with traumatic brain injuries, not just what the insurance companies clear, but what really works. And I just got an email last night that bill just went through. So that's a big one for us. They're starting to address the fact that these brain injuries, they are an injury. You know, it's not getting your bell rung. You know, there's nothing ringing about it. And so we need more and more guys to step forward. I lost my train of thought, excuse me, but when I was at this luncheon just a few days ago at the Capitol, and D. Smith shows up and does his big dog and pony show. And we had about 30 of us there. And I'm sitting down at lunch with Senator Perez, who I didn't know who he was. He sits down with me, and he says, so why are you here? And I said, I'm here because I've had 9 NFL-caused brain surgeries, which were proven in a court of law. And I said, and I have no benefits, 0. I said, you are paying my medical right now. I had to file for Medi-Cal, I guess it is, this last year. I've been a self-employed, you know, environmental consultant for years. I've always had to pay for my own insurance, but it's gotten, you know, we're tapped. We lost the house, and the senator says, I can't believe this. I said, where in the hell have you been? Really, where in the hell have you people been? So until these stories come out, and we've all been concussed, you can't play this game without being concussed. Like Joe said, hey, you see stars? That's a concussion. When you see stars, that's your brain concussing against your skull. And there's varying degrees of concussions. You know, you can be knocked out, you can be staggering. You don't have to have that. And there isn't a guy in here that hasn't suffered hundreds, if not thousands. If you even made it to the NFL, you have had thousands of concussions. I guarantee it. And we need people to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, thank you, George. And you know what? I would just like to add, you know, where's our union? Where are they? D. Smith says that no player will be left behind. D, we're filming this. What about George Visker? He's been left behind for 35 years. So they say we have a union, but they don't represent us. In fact, Gene Upshaw says, you don't pay me, so you can complain all day, but nothing you can do about it. And he compared us to dog food in the Players Inc. in the Players Inc. settlement. So thank you, George. I appreciate that. John Hogan in the back, please.
Jason and Tom, and I don't know if you can answer this or even want to answer it, but since we're on that line of thought, does the PA have any culpability here? And you know, a while ago, Mark Franuwada in Behind the Lines came out with a thing about the Webster case, and they made a big deal of the fact that the NFL granted disability to Mike Webster for concussions, you know, years ago. So they were kind of on notice. But you know, that's the Burt Bell, Pete Rozelle retirement plan, and the PA is an equal partner there. So I would think if the NFL knew about it, the Players Association knew about it?
It's a great question. Obviously, it's something we gave a lot of thought to. The fact of the matter is, I think you dilute your impact enormously. And number one, I don't think they could respond in damages anyway. So all you would say is, well, they knew too, and so forth, so therefore that knowledge is now your knowledge because it's your association. So we gave this a lot of thought, and we think on balance we're better off going in the direction that we're going.
Thanks.
Right here, please.
The issue of concealment, how far back does that go? Because as I understand it, about 2005 is when Dr. Romano first diagnosed CTE in ex-football players. For those of us who played in the 70s and so forth, were they really just concealing it, or did they really not know? And if they didn't know what the long-term impacts of this were going to be, how can you get them to conceal it?
Well, they knew. They've known for 100 years, so it became, everybody knew, in the 90s, in the early 90s. But there was great evidence. This idea of concussion isn't something that happened, all of a sudden there was an article on concussion. That's gone on since the 1800s, so.
Go back to the Featuristica and so forth in the mid-1900s or something, and that's kind of the genesis of all this?
Sure. Absolutely. In other words, that was the problem. That was the medical problem. If you were running the company and you had information that your guys were getting hit on the head by performing their work, and if you had information, this is the effect of it. Now, they may not have known as much as they do now, but man, they knew it was bad. They knew it was bad stuff. So I'm not dissuaded, and if they can find a jury that's going to say, well, the NFL really knew it was really, really bad in 1986, but they really didn't know it was really, really bad in 1970. If they can find a jury that makes that decision, I'll shake their hand at the end of the case.
One of the other things I want to add, this isn't a new disease. All it is related to a new sport.
I mean, you know what? I'm not a lawyer, but it's common sense. If your child plays on the freeway, he or she is going to get hit and severely injured. If you get hit in the head, you're going to have brain damage.
The first time this came out, the first time I ever heard about people making money off this was a car accident. Hell, we were car accidents. We were the cars, and my brain was the passenger. Now think about it. Next thing, and this is just me.
Well, just a minute.
Yeah.
I want you to come with me if we try this case, and you can be my co-counsel.
Ain't me. But second thing, I spoke to him last night, John Hauser. He's been married 55 years. I spoke to this lady right here earlier today. This is just me again. We are going about this wrong. We are a closed circle, and we're empty shells. All of us in here that played this game are empty shells. One day we get it, one day we don't. That woman right there, that woman has been married to him, they get it because they're living it. My grandchildren, my son, I got to explain to my family my problems. Let me tell you something. We all know we're crazy. We were crazy when we first started. We have that mentality. We forget. We follow. When you become an athlete, you become a soldier. You follow orders. You don't think for yourself. Because if you thought for yourself, you wouldn't be playing. They don't even want to deal with you. Because you're going to create problems. So you follow orders. His wife, this woman, they deal with the aftermath of us following orders. We're still following orders now. At 55, 60 years old, that's why they chose us. Let's get real. If you create problems, perfect example. Rick Pitino said, they asked him one time about problems. He said that when I have a problem on my team, I get rid of it immediately. Immediately. That same mentality has happened with us. To me, we need to hit the internet. When you fight a giant, You fight him with what you have. What we're missing, we're keeping this closed. Hell, let it explode. Put that woman's children on Facebook. Put that woman's children on YouTube. Let her children do a video on how it has affected their father. Let some of these children get on YouTube about how this has affected their family. Let somebody, and I'm not say this now, stop. The NFL wants women. They want women because they're new. All us old farts, we're gonna follow football regardless. They want new money, they want new blood. We're missing a point. Involve the families, and involve the women, and involve the children, and you speak to a whole different class of people.
Rick, I guess all I would say to that is, you know, financial resources, and you know what? It's free, but it takes a lot of time. And if you had any idea how much time Robert and myself spend on it and how much money I've spent over the years on it, nothing in life is free. And I'm agreeing with what you're saying, is that the beast we're fighting, they're paid to do it. Nolan Harrison, he's paid well. D. Smith, he's paid well. Roger Goodell gets paid $30 million. And these owners are all billionaires. I agree with what you're saying, but the only way we're going to get any type of justice is this way, is what we're doing right here in front of a court. I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can take pictures. You can take pictures. You cannot control what someone takes. It's the one medium they cannot control.
I agree with you 1,000%. That.
If we are going to fight this fight, if we truly going to fight this fight, involve the mothers, the children, the grandfathers, and the churches. If you talk that negative publicity there and see what happens.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's why we put a family panel on, and we're going to go into a lot more detail tomorrow. Good. And tell some of our stories, because I wrote that book. It wasn't about Jeff and Brittany Winans when I went to the hearings. It was about George Fisker and his family, Dave Peer and Heidi Peer. It was about Joe D. and his wife. It was about all these other families that I had not a freaking clue about. I thought it was only about us. And I had no idea that all these other families were suffering until I saw it with my own eyes. And I'm holding up their wife's hands and we're crying, listening to our husbands tell their story and looking around and hearing that this wife was going through the same thing with her husband, and this wife was going through the same thing with her husband that we were going through. And I went back and rewrote the whole damn book because it wasn't our story anymore. It was all these family stories. And I'm excited to be here today, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow. But we do have to come together with the wives and the families as well. I know that for a fact, and that's why I'm here.
And I agree with you. I certainly agree. Thanks for coming.
One thing that we're doing initially is we want it to be private, because so much of what goes on is we all know in our families. Sometimes the first time we tell
open, just like I know everyone else here in this room, to get the word out any way possible. We want any and all suggestions. You know, our blog gets anywhere from 1 million to 1.5 million hits a month. And I know for a fact that the NFL doesn't have somebody as good as that man right there, Robert Lee. Yeah. And you know what? They have to deal with the truth. And they don't want to hear it. So anybody has any suggestions how to get the word out, what we can do, please bring them forward.
First of all, Brandy, I want to applaud you for stepping forward, because it's a very painful thing to air your dirty laundry to everybody. And you hit so many points right on the head. You know, for years I've been talking about this, way before any of these lawsuits came out. You know, I was pissed off for years, but I felt like, you know, I was on the outside because I kept bitching about it. And I'm not one of the guys now. Who in the hell is this guy over there whining and crying about his injury? And I talked about it for a long time. And then but we need the wives. I do brain injury consulting now. And my second PowerPoint slide, when it goes on, and I have a quote. There's a quote from my work comp hearing back in '84, '86. And I said, a traumatic brain injury is like throwing a rock in a pond. The number of people impacted is huge. And I use this analogy. I come home, one of the symptoms we have, you know, anger management issues. We come home and the wives and kids are walking on eggshells. And my wife gets upset. So she goes to work and she's telling one of her associate teachers about what's going on. And she goes home and tells her husband, Michael's not ever going to play football. And the kid gets upset. And the ripple effect, I don't know how far it goes. You know, what this does to families is unbelievable. But what I've learned over the years, too, is the first time when I first started my recovery, about '09, it was right after the GQ magazine came out with Bennett's story. Now, Bennett O'Malley, I speak with Bennett regularly, and I meet with him on a regular basis. But when that first came out, all of a sudden I'm thinking, you know what? It's not just me. And it validified a lot of the stuff that we've been going through. You know, and again, I lose my train of thought on excuse me, but I had one question I wanted to ask John and you, Tom, and Jason. If any of these players, including myself, are diagnosed or as 100% disabled for Social Security, which I just was recently, do we still not qualify for disability from the NFL?
Well, you still qualify for damages from the NFL. In other words, the fact that you have other sources now of some partial disability payments or whatever it is, that doesn't take away from your rights, if you have rights, against the guy who caused the problem. And you know, I have to say another thing that's triggered. I've interviewed now, I don't know how many players, and the hardest thing for these guys to talk about is the ramifications of this injury. Nobody ever minds saying, hey, I broke my ankle, you know, exactly. Oh, God, my knee is killing me, whatever. But when you have to admit things such as your ability to function has really been mishandled, people try to cover that up. I mean, they really have a hard time coming to grips with it. You know, of all these, a whole bunch of the players. The other thing that's important, in looking at these PET scans of all these players, the ones I've seen 110 of them, the part of the brain which is almost universally affected is the anger management part.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, so that part there is the thing that is the thing, and then that starts causing disruption of the household, the kids, the spouse, and everything else. And you didn't cause it. It's what's going on in your brain. I didn't mean to talk so much.
No, that's perfect. Those are some of the things that we need to talk about. What this does to the families, what I learned to do years ago, when I first started all this, I went down to Dr. Amon's clinic, and he had me for 3 days, 12, 14 hours a day, and I took my wife and my son with me. And I said, I want you guys to talk to the doctors when I'm not around. You go in the room with them and you tell them exactly what's going on with me. Because we have this idea, and even before I got married, I was almost 40 before I ever got married. I would take my older brother with me. I always had to take somebody with me to a doctor's appointment because I could write down everything they're telling me and scratching, and I'd walk out of there and I'd go, hey, he says I'm doing pretty good. And my brother would go, what the hell are you talking about? Didn't you hear him say X, Y, Z? And I'm thinking, I heard the good stuff. We hear what we want to hear. And people, it's very hard for us to take in what people from the outside say about us. And we all need to learn to listen to our wives and kids. They're not on your ass. They're not ragging on you. We need to step back and listen to folks around us, because we all are damaged. We all have issues.
And if you look at the business decisions we've made, the family issues, I mean, it just tears families apart. And there's so many wives. I mean, if a player is fortunate enough to be married, they don't want any part of it. It's just, it's a terrible thing. But if you can deal with it, you know, there's help, but we have no help. So players try to self-medicate, and it just gets worse.
Dave, let me share a little story. I got an email, and I've been getting an email for over probably about 2 years now, from Dave Kusaric's wife, now widow. Mary Lee would email me every week and say, Jason, I wish you would have known Dave years ago when we met. She was subject to that Sports Illustrated article maybe about a year ago. Talked about what Dave went through with his disease and how one day she caught him ready to brush his teeth with a razor. Every week she would update me on Dave's progress in the skill center, and it would, if you went through the history and chronology of this, it would just get worse and worse. And she would always say, I have to do this every day. I have to go there. I hope he remembers and knows and everything. Well, she wanted me to share that last week he lost his battle after 10 years of fighting dementia. I know a lot of you knew Dave, and I just wanted to share that with that because she asked me to.
Isaiah.
Thank you. I'm back here this year because I believe with all my heart what you guys are doing. And I'm going to say this very briefly. We did not mention the concussion lawsuit at our convention a couple of months ago, nor did we mention any other lawsuits. Why? I don't know. I'm not an attorney, but I wanted to ask the council, is there a conflict of interest? And is that one of the reasons why the Players Association can't get involved? A. Two, we have started a project. We will break ground on the one in Orlando in October for a assisted living care home for all of the concerned injuries. We've raised over $50 million already for that. We just left Dallas last week, and we received another $15 million, and we bought a piece of land there. The second one will be open up in Dallas. And you heard me last year. I mean, you know that I'm a pretty loyal old guy. You know, if I'm with Buffalo, damn it, I'm going to be with Buffalo. If I'm with the Rams, I'm going to be with the Rams. Well, I'm not a chapter president anymore. I'm here for my personal belief today, and I believe that what you guys are doing is fantastic. I think, though, you have the greatest attorney, in my opinion, in the world sitting right beside you. And he ought to be able to tell us what we need to do to get the stuff out there that's going to help him do what he has to do in his case. Number three, there are two guys here that I know personally that I have the utmost of respect for, Mr. White and Mr. Delamalure. And I'm going to ask them at a certain time while I'm here to sit on the advisory board that they have chosen me to find for these two care centers. When I get that board, right now I have Tutal Jones and I have Tony Dorsett, Dewey McLean, a couple of guys from the Players Association on the executive board. When I get this board together, then we're going to be able to go into DeMaurice's office. And that's why I totally admire you and respect you, Mr. Mix, the same thing. I think that until we can sit at a table, we're not going to make any progress other than through the legal process, which was your approach when I first met you.
And still is.
And Tom Girardi and Jim Biddito, who I've known for a while. Jim Biddito was my agent when I was with the Rams and with Buffalo, him and Ed Masry. But what I'm trying to say to you, that there's a lot of things that they're trying to do to get better. They gave $22 million to all players that have retired from 1 to 15 years at the convention for re-entry, go to college. I didn't like that either, because I'm thinking, you know, and the guys from 16 to 40 years old got $6.2 million into the PAT fund.
What about us, though?
But that's why I'm on your page. I'm on the same page. Personally, I am. But at the same time, I've learned through a lot of mistakes I've made in my life that the way you get forward is by humbling yourself. Someone said today that when you make a mistake, you know, you have to man up to it. We've apologized for how I carried myself, but we're right there. I mean, it's timing. And now this lawsuit is getting ready to come to head, and there are going to be benefits, hopefully. There are going to be treatment facilities, hopefully. And that's why I want to get someone from here to sit on that advisory board with me so that we can get in the DeMaurice's office to let him know how we feel. There's 5 guys that run that whole NFLPA, and that's what you got. And all we're doing is just continuing to have our difference of opinion going nowhere. And so I think that we need a strategy of some of the things that you want to get accomplished. Why are you here today? Why are all these guys here? What do they want? Well, that's what needs to be put together, and that's what we need to be able to get in front of those 5 guys that run all of the benefits, that managed it, all of the $930 million we got in the CPA.
And you know what? I don't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
But the only way we're going to get those benefits is in a court of law.
Well, that's good too. That's good too.
And so I agree with what you're saying, but they're not going to give up anything unless they have to.
Well, a lot of these guys don't know about some of the things that are changing slowly. And I'm going to talk to Ed, and I'm going to talk to Joe, and I'm going to talk to Ron and you, and maybe you can get it out in your blog so they at least know. If they may not like it, they may think it's not enough, but that's what it is. But at least they'll have all the information, and we can go from there.
All right,
Thank you.
Did you want to address it?
No, I just want to say I love you, Isaiah. You do a lot of good stuff, David. I just said I love you. I love you.
Well, they didn't bought me some hearing aids, and I still can't hear. Yeah. I love you too. I love you too. I love you too. I love you too. I will go and say something. I love you too. I love all you.
Dave, you want to make a decision?
Boom 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 boom.